There are people who no longer cry when they are beaten, not because they do not feel pain, but because their bodies have learned how to be silent in order to survive. In many violent households, silence is not passivity, but a strategy. It is a language formed after countless failed attempts at resistance. Victims learn to withdraw, to anticipate moods, to emotionally disappear so as not to trigger another person's anger. From the outside, this silence is easily mistaken for submission, but from within, it is the result of a complex psychological adaptation in which a person is forced to trade their own voice to preserve a fragile sense of safety. In psychology, the sense of safety is the foundation of all healthy psychological development. Under normal conditions, the family is the first and most important space where this sense of safety is formed. When violence enters the family, it not only causes immediate pain, but also shatters the individual's primal structure of safety. The brain can no longer associate the concept of home with rest and recovery. Instead, home becomes a place that requires constant vigilance, where every moment of calm may simply be the lull before another storm. This rupture causes victims not only to lose safety within a specific relationship, but also to lose faith in safety as a general concept. The world, in their perception, becomes unpredictable and threatening. This explains why many survivors of domestic violence struggle to trust others even after they have left the abusive relationship. When violence occurs repeatedly, the victim's brain gradually restructures itself to prioritize survival. Brain regions associated with fear responses and hypervigilance become more active, while areas responsible for critical thinking, long-term planning, and emotional regulation are suppressed. This is not an innate pathology, but a direct consequence of prolonged exposure to a stressful environment. In this state, victims may make decisions that outsiders perceive as irrational, such as returning to an abusive partner after leaving. From a neurological perspective, however, these decisions are made by a brain seeking familiarity in order to reduce stress. Familiarity, even when painful, is still more predictable than the uncertainty of an entirely new life. Domestic violence not only causes emotional harm, but also distorts how victims perceive reality. When their feelings are repeatedly dismissed, when they are told you're overreacting or it's not a big deal, victims gradually begin to doubt their own perceptions. This phenomenon erodes their ability to trust their own judgment, making them increasingly dependent on others' interpretations, especially those of the abuser. This cognitive distortion makes it difficult for victims to recognize the severity of their situation. Violence becomes normalized, turning into a familiar part of daily life. As standards are lowered, behaviors that society considers unacceptable come to be seen by the victim as inevitable. Learned helplessness does not only cause victims to stop acting, it paralyzes their will. When people believe that all efforts are futile, they do not merely stop trying, they stop dreaming. Plans for the future gradually disappear, replaced by day-to-day survival. Many victims describe their existence as one of waiting, without knowing what they are waiting for. This is a psychological state characteristic of prolonged trauma, where time is no longer experienced as a flow toward the future, but as a repetitive sequence of days. Trauma bonding is one of the most misunderstood psychological mechanisms. In abusive relationships, care and affection following violence often carry a sense of rescue, making victims feel as though they have been pulled up from the bottom. This feeling is extremely powerful because it follows a period of intense stress. The brain registers this relief as evidence of love. even though it is merely the temporary cessation of pain. Over time, victims may lose the ability to distinguish between healthy love and emotional manipulation. They may feel empty when a relationship remains calm for too long because their brains have become accustomed to the cycle of violence and reconciliation. This makes it difficult for them to adapt to stable relationships in the future. Domestic violence not only damages emotions, it reshapes personal identity. When repeatedly belittled, victims gradually construct their self-image based on these criticisms. They do not just think they have done something wrong, they come to believe that they are wrong. This distinction is psychologically crucial because when fault is tied to one's essence, it becomes far harder to change. This wounded identity makes it difficult for victims to accept kindness from others. They may feel undeserving or suspicious of others' motives. This creates a paradox. The more wounded they are, the harder it becomes for them to receive healing. Isolation in domestic violence is not merely about reduced social contact, but about the contraction of the entire inner world. With no one to share their experiences with, victims' thoughts loop inward, becoming increasingly distorted and negative. Without external feedback, they struggle to test reality, to recognize that what they are enduring is unjust and abnormal. Isolation also intensifies dependence, as the abuser becomes the center of the victim's emotional universe. In such circumstances, leaving the relationship does not mean losing one person, but losing the entire familiar structure of life. Domestic violence does not end with a single generation. Children raised in violent environments learn to view relationships through lenses of fear and control. Whether they later become victims or perpetrators, the imprint of trauma profoundly shapes how they love, trust, and resolve conflict. Understanding domestic violence as an intergenerational phenomenon helps us see that intervention is not only about stopping current abuse, but also about preventing its repetition in the future. Healing for survivors of domestic violence cannot stop at ending the abuse. More importantly, it involves restoring a sense of safety, autonomy, and self-worth. This process requires time, professional support, and a non-judgmental environment. Survivors need to be heard, believed, and empowered to make decisions about their own lives. Healing does not mean forgetting the past, but integrating painful experiences into one's life story in a way that no longer paralyzes the present. As survivors gradually reclaim their voices, they do not merely escape violence, they rebuild an identity rooted in worth and in the right to safety and love. Psychological analysis of people experiencing domestic violence shows that they are not weak or irrational individuals, but human beings who have adapted to extreme circumstances through complex psychological mechanisms. Recognizing this is the first step for society to move from judgment to understanding, from blame to support. Domestic violence is a profound psychosocial issue that demands the involvement not only of victims and their families, but of the entire community. When we truly understand the psychology of survivors, we not only help them heal, but also contribute to breaking the cycle of violence, opening the possibility of a safer future for generations to come.